The human body is quite the complex piece of machinery, a well-oiled machine that has all of its parts interwoven with one another to allow us to move, to think, and to exist in a world to the point that even has us question if we are or are not the sum of our parts. These meat suits, according to the theory of evolution, took hundreds of millions of years to come into being as they are, with Homo sapiens specifically, which has given us the pinnacle of our own society, with no record or evidence of anything else even coming remotely close to achieving what we have. Humanity, for all intents and purposes, has built on this world and virtually conquered it for our own gain. All thanks to our sort of jack-of-all-trades bodies and our massive intellect. Probably could do without the anxiety though. But what about other species? Sort of like how our bodies live on a planet, we require the world we are living on currently to be successful, otherwise we would be nothing but, I guess, floating bodies in an endless void. Could another animal do what we have done, except one step up the ladder? Do I sound like an absolute madman? Probably. It's about our old pal and constant unwanted companion, parasites. If they could control the human body in some form or fashion, could they boast about what they have created using what was already present in the body they inhabit? To this end, what would that mean for the original host species? Well, today, let's find out. Down in Ohio, things are apparently not swag like Ohio. Maybe this nightmare zone where PvP is constantly enabled everywhere was always meant to be the start of an alien invasion. A creature would be discovered that at first results in a single person being taken over, but as just a few days passed, the entire school would be overcome by body-snatching parasites hell-bent on taking over the entire species. Average Ohio day confirmed. Ironically, probably keeping our bodies healthier than we do with the reliance on water, and that would ultimately be their downfall. So in today's episode, let's discuss the brain-controlling parasite in the faculty and attempt to understand what it has done in the past and how it even got here in the first place. We kick off our story to some sweet The Offspring, which even if I played half a second of this, they would rip the monetization from this video before I even knew it was happening. Classic. At least it's not South Korea Telecom coming after me this time. We find ourselves on the football field with things going on that are apparently not so great. The coach is about to terminate the entire team as he instead elects to just yell at them. More specifically, he goes for the quarterback because he missed a play. Like, bro, it's high school football. Actually, having played that myself, I remember busting tail all summer in 100-degree plus heat to lose almost every game. In fact, actually, I think we did lose every game. My high school was more focused on academics than sports, and our coach ended up yelling at us, and our football program was unfixable, and I'm pretty sure he actually told us we sucked at our last game. Thanks, coach. That was a very cash money inspiring speech. We lost that game too. Great times. Actually, it wasn't. I learned nothing from team building. So the Terminator then flips the entire bench in a temper tantrum before getting mad at a sprinkler. As he sits there smacking it, he is approached by someone unseen. And I can only assume it's the people in white coats coming to administer at least some type of medication, as they've had enough of him going after quite literally anything around him. Later on in the teacher's lounge, Mr. Tate gets denied his trip to New York, which then he sits down. That wasn't very alpha of him. The principal also tells him to forget it, you're not getting out of Ohio. We all know, nobody escapes Ohio. It's a state of mind as well as a physical prison. Alright, I'm just playing with you, Ohio. You know you're one of the states in the United States. So the principal hits them with the doom and gloom as the school board won't give them money, or any sort of money except for sports, which is horrifically true as sports bring in money. Who cares about investing in younglings? Later that night, the principal goes to lock up, entering the dark school, no thanks, and as she does, she hears something. Liquid Coach comes out of nowhere and shows up and hits on her and then asks for a pencil. She hands him a pencil, and then he just kind of stabs it through her hand for some reason as she slashes him with the keys. He gets on a PA as she runs around and looks for a way out, which turns into just a continuous long-running fight. Running for the door, it's chained up for some reason. Why is it chained up? Didn't she just come through this? Well, that should have been an indicator to her that something was wrong, but we're about to find out. She again goes to get her keys as she's able to get the door open, and they both shut it and lock him in. Which, when they succeed, the other teacher then stabs the principal, saying, "I always wanted to do that." Okay? So now we arrive the next day. It's 1990 school, so everyone already looks like they're in their 30s because horrifically, they are now close to their 60s. Holy God, time is a nightmare. More so with our hilariously brief lifespans. But we can push our mortality out of our minds because an absolutely cherry 1970 Pontiac GTO comes flying in, almost hitting several pedestrians, which is pretty par for the course for GTO owners. Also, there was this one guy who was super bent out of shape that I talked about cars, which, I do like cars in my War of the Worlds episode, and considering I'm the guy writing and conceptualizing these videos and this entire channel, I suppose I'm able to cover any part as in depth as I like, so here we go. My headcanon says that this has to be a big bore choice, being the 400 cubic inch V8, which specifically had a 4.12 inch bore, which as we all know increases the engine's breathing as it's naturally aspirated, which shifts the power band to higher RPMs. Sporting 330 horsepower, it would unfortunately only become more cringe later on when the gas crisis happened in 73, I believe it was, because if you look at what came out of that era, like the Mustang II or even the 78 model of GTO at 180 horsepower, we really took a turn for the worse. Or look how they massacred my baby, the 1967 Impala versus a modern day Impala. Anyhow, this section was brought to you by that one guy who complained and talked about how I shouldn't talk about cars on this channel. Thanks for reaching out, man. Your opinion is noted. The helmet head then parks in 3 spots and pops the trunk, grabbing some pins and pencils. As a random dude just straight punches Frodo in the face. What the name of all that is holy was that about? Like, can you imagine just you're walking along and getting hit in the face and saying, oh, my fault, instead of turning someone's leg digitigrade at the knee? Couldn't be me. A random car crash then happens in the distance, which is interesting as a fight breaks out, which is not actually the standard for that reaction. Stokes, the goth chick, then runs into Stan as he calls her a beast, and this will happen about 4 more times, which, I mean, we'll probably need the Falcon meme at this point. You know the one, and then they kissed or whatever it says. I haven't actually read it. And that's what it says. Alright, then Delilah talks about random things with a group. Stan comes to kiss her and he gets shut down in front of everyone. Ah, wonderful feeling, I bet. It's never happened to me, though. I wouldn't know what that's like.
Right.
Moving on. So Frodo then gets hit in the crotch by a pole, and it's like, bro, throw a gut punch. Come on, man. And now we meet Mary Beth. Look, man, I live down here, and southern drawls really aren't this thick, usually. She's got to be from the foothills of Tennessee or something, because good lord, she's talking like this. I don't know. I've heard some people. It's just not me. So this school is like pretty chaotic. There's like 100 things going on. It looks more like a college campus than an actual high school. And then we see the dude from that 70s show. It's hilarious. He's a scumbag in every show, and he's a scumbag in real life. Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? Zeke then sells him some stuff, and school begins. Heading over to the teacher's lounge, there's a whole lot going on as the nurse is sick. Jon Stewart says maybe she should go home, when she says, I want to save my sick days for when I'm not sick. And he's like, oh, why don't you just stick a pin in my eye? I don't really know if that's a warranted response to that one. It's like not even a good one either. The Terminator is currently engaged in cooling his internal systems with water. And meanwhile, over in Miss Burke's class, she's nervous and a bit of a nerd. But in the immortalized words of Freddy from Scooby-Doo, nerdy chicks like you turned me on too. And why was I allowed to watch that movie as a kid? Who knows? Zeke then raises his hand and answers her questions, which frames him as super smart. So you know the archetype, like a super smart dude with a classic car and a give him hell attitude. What a Chad. Stan talks to Delilah about how he's quitting the football team, and his girlfriend says that she's gonna break up with him if he does because of a social hierarchy, and it'll be ruined. Alright, well, see ya. Mary Beth later goes and talks to Stokely as she has no friends, and she says she's from Atlanta, Georgia. No shot, bro. We don't sound like that down here. Delilah comes over to stir the pot for absolutely no reason, and now we head back out to the football field where Frodo thinks about, well, it's the 90s and he's picked on, so I guess it's anyone's guess. Non-solid state T then comes over to tell him to get off the field in a painful encounter as Stokely is noticing a bunch of strange things going on. Once again, running into Stan for the 8th time. Ah, young love. Frodo brings the one creature to the Daily Show to get it checked out after seemingly finding it on the field. It's water-based and obviously somewhat alive, but it's down in Ohio, which is a little perplexing. Zeke once again knows about everything and anything at all times as he chimes in. He says, yeah, I'm a contradiction. Whatever that means. No, bro, I think you're just a bit of a tool, that's all. So they accidentally spill some water on it, which makes the thing move again. They dump it into a fish tank and it immediately sprouts tendrils. So John's first idea is to fondle it as it splits into 2 and gets one of his fingers bitten as it syncs up tendrils with Stokely's fingers. Okay, so there are several things happening here. First, this species is obviously purely aquatic. With what we will learn later, its own world had no land and only water, at least this is what is espoused by the Queen. This aquatic species also appears to hail from a planet that even though it supposedly only had water, there must have been some form of cyclical change on their planet that resulted in a dry season. The reasoning behind this is the parasite's ability to enter a form of like hibernation once exposed to dry surfaces. If you take a fish, for instance, that is only adapted to water and bring it out of water, obviously it's not only just going to dry out, but it's also going to suffocate because the air moving past its gills is not as efficient at depositing oxygen as water moving past the gills. Taking a species that is fully adapted to water and comparing it to this parasite clearly shows at some point in their history, the ones that were able to enter a form of hibernation to protect themselves during the drier periods of time were the ones to be able to keep reproducing. This calls into question what the Queen will say later about their world being only oceans. I doubt it, because if that was the case, there would be no adaptation to dry air. Also, spilling water on the creature reawakens it suspiciously, and that would be a lot like rain on their own planet. And we actually see adaptations like this on our planet as well. For instance, the African mudfish, as its name implies, will encase itself in mud as the area it lives in dries up seasonally, which it can keep it alive for several months. As oxygen diffuses into the slimy mud it coats itself in and remains alive. When the water falls once more, it'll break down this casing, releasing them into the surrounding area. I believe it is a lot like how this species operates. It appears as though they are arthropodic somewhat, possessing kind of a thin, clear shell that allows them to not become desiccated, which may also be covered in some form of mucus. When water lands on them, this will tell their nervous system that there is water in the area and it's time to wake back up and begin at least their parasitic process. Apart from the hypothesized history based on their adaptations, they are clearly carnivorous to the point that, again, they're parasitic. When entering the tank of water, at first the original version does not appear to have teeth. However, based on the needs of the creature, it is able to divide asexually, with the new version of itself having these teeth necessary to bite the teacher. And this would imply that these creatures at will can change their own genetic coding. Now, this could have given them the adaptation to actually enter hibernation, but stopping yourself from eating dirt, which implies subduing and slowing down your own biochemistry, is orders of magnitude more difficult than recombinating genes to create teeth. But one of the interesting things that we do see is the tendrils' outline hands seemingly feeling the electrical activity contained within, and what we will see later will explain why it does this. Over at a pool in a public school, that's weird, Stan quits the team and the coach is oddly okay with it. Mainly because he has bigger fish to fry, but more likely his brain is operating at an altered capacity. Over in the locker room, once again, they pick on Frodo. Bro, throw a punch. As Stan heads to the shower, a teacher comes in. It's Mrs. Brummel, and she's saying that she can't breathe. She keeps repeating this, as this would likely be rather alarming, as then her scalp starts sloughing away. As they take her to the nurse, the coach is standing in the sprinkler like a complete weirdo, and they say, well, she had cancer and this caused her scalp to fall off. No need to look into that further. Thank you for your input. But out at the GTO, Zeke is selling his stuff. Miss Burke comes out and tells Zeke about his intellect and if he only applied himself and blah, blah, blah. Remember, you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have a work ethic or desire to apply it, you're about as useful as a helicopter ejection seat. Being intelligent isn't enough to just get praise and fame and power, and people who actually believe that get outworked by people they perceive as less than themselves all the time. Then they usually wonder why those people are higher up on the chain and they're on grunt work duty. Frodo and Delilah then head into the teacher's lounge as Frodo makes a pass at her, and then the teachers come into the lounge. Who could have predicted this? They drink and splash themselves with water, and then talk about how the climate is making their nervous system impulsive, but the entire faculty has almost been turned. Now, what does this mean exactly? Well, it's clear that the parasite somehow interacts with the human nervous system, but it also shows how the humans are still in there. So you're not crazy. When it's hot out, you do have a shorter temper. We like to imagine for some reason that our bodies do not have as much control over us as they do, and like somehow we're above our biological functions, which I've always found a little strange. Like when people are sick and they wonder why they can't stay focused, or when my wife is hungry, why does she develop an attitude? Life's great mysteries. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not really that mysterious. The needs of your body influence your brain more deeply than you might imagine. For instance, the other day, someone tagged me on Twitter about how someone donated a kidney to their friend, and then all of a sudden that friend now has the same bathroom habits at night as that other friend. Well, it's been noted also in heart transplants, it will cause the recipient to crave the same foods the original owner liked, which is just, that one's absolutely bizarre, but it shows our bodies and the pieces of our bodies have a real impact. When we get hot, our bodies will begin to become concerned about regulation of that heat. In doing so, impulses associated with discomfort will be less controlled by our brain. Our sensory nervous system will keep telling our brain, hey, you need to get out of the heat and seek shelter, which our brain will begin focusing on that rather than managing negative emotions effectively. The hotter you get, the more this information takes precedence over emotions. The parasites know this, and they are actually attached to the nervous system, saying it's causing them to have difficulty keeping their brain under control, as typically the brain would likely be running its standard functions, even though it is under control by the parasite. And something else to know is that the parasite is actively dehydrating the body, and that's why they're drinking so much water. None of that is being turned into sweat, which means the body would actually have even more difficulty cooling itself. But likely the cerebral cortex is somehow subdued, causing the person to be consciously knocked out, but their bodies are still being piloted by the parasite. By using the normal background functions of the brain, the body would still operate as well as it did prior, but it is still susceptible to the effects of climate, which disrupts the parasites. It's almost like with a negative effect, or at least a negative enough effect, the human might wake back up, triggering a struggle for control over the body. So they push the nurse against the door as they then attack her and put a creature in her ear. Talk about a really bad tinnitus attack after that. As Delilah falls backwards, they spot the other teacher in there as Frodo and Delilah then make their move and run to the principal. They try to tell her what's happening as everyone comes out of the lounge and they appear fine. Hilariously, they make a break for it, and despite the fact that Frodo wouldn't leave Delilah behind, Frodo falls and Delilah's like, see ya, and she just keeps running. Definitely not worth getting attached to her is all I'm gonna say. This seems to be an incredibly fast process though. Enter the brain, likely an electrical shock of sorts. It would be rendered to the cerebrum itself, rendering the person unconscious as it quickly connects to the spinal cord and brainstem. From here, it is clearly able to interface with these two critical areas, but also has been said they can glean memories from the brain. This transfer of knowledge would be as simple as forcing an electrical current through the brain in specific areas such as the hippocampus and having a tendril down line to receive the signal. Now, this is a massively simplified explanation of how the memory would work, as this would require extensive connections to the brain as well as to the prefrontal cortex, which is where memories are actually also stored. But this shows how it is able to take these memories to be used after while rendering the person unconscious. The parasite also likely sets up shop underneath about the midbrain, allowing it to reach to all of these areas quite easily in order to control the body. Later, they come back with the police and their parents. They open up the closet and nothing is in there. Yes, there was no way they could have moved a body at all in the several hours that took. Frodo looks like a fool as his coach tells him, there's plenty of chasing on the field, we could use your speed. It's basically a entendre of, we're gonna hunt you down. The other officer gets turned by the principal as Frodo interrupts his mom about to get changed by her as well. That night, the dad tears apart his room as he's put on restriction with his old man finding his stash as well. And remember, the mating rituals, I guess you could call them, is absolute poison for your brain. It hijacks your reward system with something known as a super stimulus reward. It decreases your gray matter in your brain. It should not be considered normal to look at it at any age, and it robs you of your social ability, confidence, and focus. If you can stop looking at that crap, definitely stop looking at that crap. But anyways, he decides that he's gonna go sneak out as he spots the faculty outside. Literally falling from the second floor, he's totally fine, what a Chad, as then he runs into his dad. See, but he spots the faculty out there for a second, and then when he looks back up, he says, I must be losing it because they disappear almost instantly. I don't know what the movie is implying here, or that he's just straight up tripping, or something else, because this was kind of a weird one. But the next day, Frodo gets dropped off at work, and this isn't a shtick. I know I've said Frodo like 100 times. I've actually forgotten what his name is, and he has no other name. He's Frodo. So anyways, T-1000 then talks to his dad as he heads inside. There's no telling at this point who's infected and who's not. Delilah grabs Frodo as they get called to the office, but they just completely ignore that. The teacher's lounge is now stocked with water and everyone is remaining quite hydrated. Health. Stokely gets pushed on stand for the 8th time. Like, bro, just go for it already. And he tells her he quit the team because he was tired of getting by on his ability to play sports, not his academics. Which, I mean, I gotta be honest with you, if your desire is to go to college, you should apply yourself in high school because that's where all your habits form, such as studying, sleeping, and maintaining like a healthy physical standard. But you can play sports and do well in school. They aren't mutually exclusive, but you really need to try harder in college if that's what you do. We also need people going into the trades. So that's also, you're gonna need to try either way. But that's how you end up in a lab like a huge nerd like yours truly. Man, I do miss it sometimes. Actually, going from a master's in virology and epidemiology here next couple semesters, so I can bring you guys even more educational content, but that's neither here nor there. The point is study. Back at school, Mr. Tate tells everyone to write down their entire family members that they know, which is never a good idea. If anybody ever tells you to do that, don't do that. Mary Beth then talks to Zeke about the stuff he's been selling, and she's like, oh, I'm allergic to aspirin. So that would probably take her out, I guess, because those things are related. Stan and Stokely then walk by talking about the ear exams going on, which is a little odd also. And Delilah talks to Stan, and Frodo goes and talks to Stokely. Holy crap, there's a lot of talking. And the entire school is now acting strange. Zeke and Mary Beth talk about some random stuff as Scumbag Extraordinaire shows back up, and he's asking for even more stuff, like everything that Zeke has got. Miss Burke now arrives to make fun of Zeke, as she's now changed to Darth Burke. So this situation kind of turns into something else, definitely not something I would have been into in high school. And as she leaves, I'm legally required to say that was a joke. Never hit on your teachers, nor should you ever be hit on. Now that the legality of that's out of the way, 18-year-old Roanoke had a completely different worldview, and brother, Spanish class was a blast. Moving on. Stokely and Frodo then talk about how alien invasions they would obviously seed the planet with misinformation at first, so that if anyone talked about it, nobody would believe it. Which is rather interesting, as if it's believed that the species, or this species in particular, was one disseminating this information out, then this would imply they are highly intelligent, or at least took over a species that was highly intelligent, which would mean that they themselves are actually just average animal intelligence until taking over another species with a larger brain. I would argue, yes, they are reliant on the host species, and we're going to see this in a moment. As the group begins orbiting one another, they go to check the tank to see where the species that they were supposed to send away to some professor somewhere, as then Stan is filled in on the aliens. Zeke and Mary Beth then break into the storage room as they share a moment. Okay then, and then Zeke hears talking in the next room. Frodo then says if the aliens were to invade the world, they wouldn't blow up the White House, they would sneak in the back door. Ohio is an absolute liability confirmed. Zeke comes in as John Daly shows up, and Zeke tells him that he thinks he's an alien. Zeke spills the beans immediately like an idiot, not taking this seriously, as then he gets thrown, and it turns out, well, look at that, everyone's an alien. Zeke cuts off John's fingers, as it shows not only has the parasitic tendrils progressed past the point of the spinal cord, but appears to inhabit many areas of the body. So why is this? Well, I'm glad you asked. The parasite, from the looks of it, isn't just an issue of one parasite per body, but multiple parasites. And it may be that you're infected with one, but with its ability to reproduce within water asexually, this shows that after a while, it begins using up the water in the body to replicate itself. And this would allow them to form a network of parasites to control your body, not unlike our neural cells, actually. As they connect through these tendrils, this will allow them to form a secondary parasitic nervous system. This replication, however, requires, as mentioned, a lot of water, which is why our bodies, or at least the bodies of the adults, constantly need to be replenished. In the older adults, it appears that the infection doesn't take properly, which leads them to become massively dehydrated, which results in their bodies falling apart quite quickly, and for their blood to congeal, which in turn causes them to essentially suffocate as all moisture is robbed from their body. But we will get into what happens to the internal organs and the presumed intelligence of this organism in a moment. Zeke then stabs the teacher in the eye as the tank gets broken, but then he succumbs to the chemical and meets his end, stopping at least that problem. So after committing what is essentially murder, and I mean it is self-defense really, so I guess maybe not, they calmly walk out of school realizing everyone is pretty much infected with this parasite. They get into Zeke's GTO and GTFO after the football team asks to play with Stan. It's the middle of the day, guys. You're not really blending in very well. Why would you be practicing football at like lunch? So as Zeke checks the radio, there's no stations playing and the cops are performing roadblocks. They enter Zeke's garage and check out his equipment. He's melting down caffeine pills and diuretics amongst other chemicals. It's a pretty cool operation, bro. They then cut a piece of the parasite and put it in a rat cage and add water. And as they do, it crawls into the mouse's ear as Zeke takes it out and performs an autopsy. Prior to this, though, this shows us something fairly concerning. This species is more than just like a singular individual that is a part of a hive. Instead, every piece of the creature is viable and parasitic. It's almost like an earthworm somewhat. But this could mean something as simple as being infected with a cell could result in a large host takeover. Although it is entirely possible the human immune system may be able to launch an effective countermeasure against it. But immunologically speaking, what would that actually look like? Well, as we all know, the human body and parasites is a lot like a sweaty butt crack in Georgia in July. They go sort of horrifically together. Parasites have long been in our species rather than, constantly fight them, which would be a continuous and difficult process that would just drain our bodies. Our bodies have largely figured out how to just incorporate them into our functionality in a beneficial way rather than an absolute detriment. Now, this isn't always the case. There are plenty of parasites. In fact, most are horrible for us, but some provide benefits such as calming the immune system. I mention it every time, but it's worth repeating that this is why allergic reactions may be getting worse in first world countries. We keep getting rid of parasites, or really nobody has to deal with parasites, which may lead to an overactive immune system that responds to everything. But regardless of that, our immune system does still have some capability when fighting parasites. First, if the parasite is an individual cell, and that was what was invading the body, it's likely that macrophages would engulf it first and then lyse it with enzymes. But this is typically with a single cell. And this may be why the parasite cannot just infect with like a scratch or a bite, because the individual cell is pretty weak. However, it should also be noted that even though the individual cell is not the main infection mode, it is likely even just like a single cell could continue to grow into the parasite, as cutting off like a piece of it and exposing it to water allows the creature to grow rapidly, likely under the same mitotic drive that allows it to clone itself in a matter of moments. So should a piece of this get into your body, it's likely that your body would not be able to overcome this infection, even with the help of eosinophils dumping cytotoxic material onto it, simply because the cells can divide too quickly in the overall size of the parasite. But you would need multiple, you would need like a chunk of it, not just a single cell, for it to actually appear to effectively invade your body and be successful. But this is probably why it chooses to remain at the size that it is, and also this is probably dictated by its own biology, but this would allow it to outmaneuver a host's immune system and take over rapidly. It may also be, from what we see later, it can onboard genetic information from the host specifically. And this would allow it to not only be able to interface with the nervous system more effectively, but also allow it to not constantly be attacked by the nervous system, as it could display MHCs, or major histocompatibility complexes, designating the parasite as an original host cell, although it may be a non-issue for the parasite regardless. We have seen with its ability to rapidly mutate, by destroying a few human cells and incorporating that genome into its own, which you really wouldn't miss, it could at least use it in terms to express the genes of the host, and this could be done quite easily given its apparent control over its own genetics. Essentially, you just need some form of DNA excision and DNA polymerase to implant those genes. So cutting them open, they find the parasite attached to the host nervous system. It then overrides the host nervous system and dries out the internal organs if it doesn't get enough water. If you're too old, the parasite cannot take to your body because it does not have enough fluid. And that's why the drug works on the parasite as it's diuretic, and this dries the parasite out, killing it in the process. Stokely suggests that they're all connected, so if they could take out the queen, they could take them all out. The mouse being infected does show something else, however. While the queen, who we will see here in a little bit, is highly intelligent, or is at least as intelligent as man, the offspring she produces are actually only as intelligent as the host is. The mouse did not appear aggressive towards humans or really act any different after its infection, likely indicating that the parasite has to work with what's there in the host. It is directed by the queen, but more complex problem solving or emotions are predicated on the host brain tissue amount. And this would lend credence that the host is still in there and the brain is being used as a median rather than just completely destroyed, which the parasite is then controlling. But in terms of intellect, basically our brain is kind of controlling the parasite in a way by allowing it to operate at the capacity it does. So some of the group then says that they need to run and hide, while some of the group says no, they need to stay and fight because eventually they won't be able to outrun this thing. And Stan brings up, what if one of us is the alien right now? So they all kind of point the finger at each other thing style. So the plan is to take the stuff Zeke has, as everyone in the group agrees that they have to do this, right? Remember this, because the next sentence is going to be a complete contradiction. So when they go to take it, for some hilarious reason, they all individually say, I'm not going to take that. Every one of them says they won't, after they just agreed to. I have no idea why. Padding the runtime, I think. But eventually, as they relent, they do take the drugs, but as they get to Delilah and Mary Beth, there's more resistance. Delilah then grabs it, as Mary Beth also does, but Delilah falls backwards as she's infected. She then nopes out of there as Stokely takes some pot shots, missing every one of them, as Delilah then runs to a car and the infected take off. So they have just enough diuretic at this point to take out the queen, although it's a diuretic, you can get it anywhere. They go to the football game where the other team begins just getting absolutely infected with every tackle, and that sucks. And also the pyrotechnics are insane for a literal high school football game. Maybe buy some books with those, I don't know. So this super spreader event will ensure the entire town is infected as well as the visiting town, as the human group is spotted by the principal and other faculty. Heading into the gym, the principal confronts the students as they wrap her in a net and go to give her the diuretic. She refuses as Stan says he won't take the shot, but finally Zeke just straight puts one in the dome. Well, I guess they aren't helping her then. And by the way, they are still conscious in there, sort of. But after her brain is destroyed, the parasite fully takes over as they hit her with the powder, taking out the parasite. Again, this shows the brain is being used for intelligence in its capacity, which requires the cerebrum to remain intact. After it isn't, it falls back to parasite intellect, which is more animalistic. So they assume that she was the queen as they look around to see if that worked. Stan then goes outside to check like a Giga Chad, and then he shares a moment with Stokely. Stan runs out there and asks the coach if he's all good, but then spots the parasite coming out of his face. Not good. Stan then runs back to them to let them know it did not work, as Zeke puts the drug outside, but Stan won't do it because he's infected. Got him. He launches into the whole, there's no pain, no worry, also no freedom. What's the old saying? Those who would give up liberty for safety will have neither. Hive minds be damned. Better be free and afraid than assimilated and safe, Roll Tide, hell yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little too patriotic. Trapped inside the gym, Frodo goes through who might be the queen then. Zeke and Frodo exit to get into the GTO as they get ambushed by the whole team. Zeke runs for it as a decoy as Delilah shows up and corners him on the bus. The team then bursts through as he makes a break for it, and Zeke gets in his car as Miss Burke shows up. There's this weird flirting because it's the 90s and Miss Burke is hot. You know, the usual. She breaks his windows and then jumps in as he's able to get rid of her by hitting a bus, which causes an explosion for some reason. As Zeke survives and Miss Burke's head then starts crawling back to its body, Zeke says screw this and runs off. So this seems out of left field, but it actually does make a lot of sense. Remember when John Daly had his fingers cut off and the tendrils immediately shot out? It would appear the parasite's main interest is keeping the host body alive. If damage happens to the body, then it will be put on a form of life support and repaired. While chemically they are not immune, when the body is damaged to this capacity, it's likely the parasite alters the behavior of the cells near the damaged area. The thing to remember about our cells is the information to reform a finger, a limb, or even your entire body is still there. All of it is located within our genes, but the process is just switched off as not to cause issues, because you wouldn't want a new leg sprouting from your kneecap one day. That would be a problem. So we could actually figure out how to activate specific genes at specific times in the future. We may actually be able to regrow people's limbs that have lost them. But now this parasite appears to be able to do just that and will regrow what has been lost, or in the case of a head or a body disconnect, it will keep the body operational and the brain alive until the two pieces can be reconnected. Now this is very likely going to be a get it done fast or not at all type of deal, as the body is operating on limited oxygen. But by reactivating mitosis on both sides of the damage, bone, muscle, and skin could in theory be reconnected, stopping the death of the organism. So Mary Beth and Stokely then talk about Stan, as Mary Beth reveals, "It was me the whole time. She's not even from Georgia, I knew it. This southern accent comes right off." She morphs into the Queen, who appears to have been expressing the genes of someone somewhere she came across, essentially stealing the phenotypic response to a gene expression. And as they run towards the pool, with her rapidly outswimming them, it grabs Stokely and knocks her out while dragging her in. She comes to with teeth almost snapping closed on her, like Resident Evil style, as they are able to escape as the Queen turns back into Mary Beth in the nude. So hilariously, as Zeke comes back, the choices are Stokely saying it's Mary Beth, while Stokely's wearing clothes, but then Mary Beth saying, no, it's Stokely, but for some unknown reason, she's completely naked. Well, that would seem a little odd to me, but then again, I'm no longer afflicted with hormones of a teenage brain, so maybe the choice just seems a little too clear on this side of puberty, because it kind of seemed like a real struggle for Zeke to make the choice. Zeke says, though, I saw you take the test, but Mary Beth was able to block it with a tendril and then drop the drug in the ensuing confusion with Delilah. Also, Stokely is somehow infected, leaving just Frodo and Zeke as Mary Beth changes once again. They begin their escape from her as Frodo is straight tweaking. Zeke gets knocked down as Stokely grabs Frodo, but he's able to escape her grasp. Mary Beth turns back into her human form as she talks about assimilating the human race and giving them a taste of her world. Mary Beth gloats about how the parasites win as it chases him into the bleachers where the seats start closing, which traps the Queen. So it shoots tendrils into Frodo's face, which means it's basically also putting parasites into his face. So we're not going to talk about what those tendrils are. Just kidding. It's like a vivipositor thing. And I hate that I know that word. I've been on Twitter way too long. It's literally melting my brain. Okay, moving on. So yeah, he stabs it in the eye as it attempts to infect him, as then this destroys all the other parasites in the process. The reasoning behind a diuretic actually working is because, much like how it inhibits renal tubular sodium reabsorption, it appears the parasites either have more salt in their bodies and have to maintain a gradient by constantly bringing in salt to their bodies, which would make sense considering they appear to be glorified neuronal cells, but by inhibiting this salt uptake, they can no longer inspire water from the body to move into their body, which, if you remember, water will always move across mediums to areas of higher solute concentration. When this process is disrupted in the parasite, considering they are water-based organisms, much like a fish out of water, they will quickly desiccate as their own internal biochemistry is disrupted. With their queen taken out, this would mean they appear to have a form of telepathy with said queen, and you can almost once again think of these parasites that inhabit others to be the queen's nerve cells that are capable of operating independently, but once infecting a host, they will now report back to the queen and are controlled by her. By taking out the queen, it's a lot like taking out the brain of a human. Sure, there are other nerve cells all over the body, but with the central nervous system destroyed, they are no longer receiving instructions or information, and as such, they cease operation and then are destroyed. In this case, by the cleanup crew known as the human body. Going to check on Stokely, her brain is now back in control as Zeke checks on them as well, and they have now won. So 1 month later, everyone is just like, well, that was weird. Okay, time to move on, I guess, as there's really not any massive concern or fears of potentially like a holdout infection somewhere. Just business as usual in Ohio. Of course, there are new things now. Zeke is on the football team for some reason, never displayed any interest in doing that, as Miss Burke is hot and bothered for him, did display interest in that. Stan and Stokely get together because of course they do, and Frodo and Delilah are now together because he's a hero, and Delilah is just a person who wants to be involved with someone famous. That relationship is built on just excellent foundations and is sure to last. And thus concludes the faculty. This parasite I hesitate to really call a true hive mind, as it really just appears to be an extended form of one organism that potentially uses its own nervous system to form a secondary, more controlled nervous system within its prey. While its own cells do parasitize the host for its own gain, I imagine this is really just a piece of the queen in another body. After abandoning their planet long ago, as their planet was said to be dying, as intelligent as the queen is, it's completely possible her species either achieved spacefaring status, or at minimum, something on their world did, and they took it over before piloting to Earth to start the invasion of our species. Although it was completely ineffective, because humanity, as per usual, takes the dub, because we are always number one. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like is awesome of you as it gets the video out in the algorithm, and subscribing, as we are really close to 1 million subscribers, is greatly appreciated. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link. I'm also posting like 2 videos a week on Roanoke Gaming, and I'm going to try to see if I can get 2 videos a week over on Roanoke Tales. But last week, or this week actually, we're talking about the Taos hum, which is this weird noise detected by a lot of people and equipment, but nobody seems to know where it's coming from. But also, speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astronaut, Rosie Kinch. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our astrophysicist, Des Dancer, and Zach Smith, as well as our scientists, Argent Sentinel, Chad the Enjoyer of Scientific Explanations of B-grade horror movies, Florian, Logan Satome, Lucian Dragon, and Tyson Nakanishi. And the rest of my patrons, I thank you guys as well. Your help goes a long way towards keeping this channel running, and is greatly appreciated. Also, bonus lore. In the great state of Georgia right now, the forever chemicals that cause cancer have been found in our water, so I would probably go with purified water, although it's in everybody's water, so there's really nothing to worry about. We're just gonna turn into a giant cancerous blob. It's good good job, guys. Anyways, all right, so that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.